Hello viewers and welcome back. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to programmatically combine two CSV files in order to import grades from an external tool into a Canvas grading CSV file, and then finally upload that CSV file to Canvas. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that programmatically, but I'm also going to include this file in my GitHub repository. So you can go ahead and just download it, and I'll demonstrate what you need to change in order to hopefully make that work for you. Let's get started. In our first step, what we want to do is import Pandas. And so we're going to be using Pandas in order to do this combination. So I'm going to go ahead and recap what I'm going to do in this lesson, and then we'll go ahead and import Pandas. So I want to, I'm going to copy and paste these lines one at a time and then explain what they do in the interest of time, because some of this is rather lengthy to be typing out. So I think it'll be easier to just copy and paste it from the Jupyter Notebook that I'm using. Now for this, I'm actually using Jupyter Notebooks with Pandas, and I'm using Jupyter Notebooks in Linux, in Ubuntu, because it's easier for me to work in Linux with this. I think you can do this with Windows just the same, and I'm not going to demonstrate how to install Jupyter Notebooks in this tutorial, but you can go ahead and do that later if you feel like it. So first I'm going to define what I'm doing. I'm going to merge my Beyond Labz grades. I have Beyond Labz as an external tool, and I'm going to merge those grades into my Canvas gradebook, and I'm only going to keep the columns that I need to upload to Canvas to avoid overwriting some grades that might be already in Canvas, okay? So I want to also keep the higher grade if Canvas has a higher grade, because sometimes I let my students reattempt certain assignments, and that way I won't be rewriting over their lower grade. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. Now if you want to, you can remove that line if you don't want to keep the higher grade. So here I'm going to outline my problem and the proposed solution. So first I'm going to read in my files, and I'm going to have to ignore the second row in my Canvas file, and I'll demonstrate that in just a minute because it isn't included in the Beyond Labz file, so that I can match everything up row by row. I'm going to identify the columns that correspond. They won't have the same header, but I need to identify what the correct headers are and which ones I need to match up. I'm going to use a dictionary for that. So I'm going to map the columns with a dictionary from Beyond Labz into Canvas, and then I'm going to merge the data, keeping the Canvas grade if it's higher. I'm going to add that row that I ignored back in at the end, and then I'm going to write a new CSV file with only the columns that I mapped, and this will avoid introducing errors into Canvas from assignments that might have a different grade. Okay, and finally I'm going to publish my Jupyter Notebook to GitHub, so that if you want, you can use it and you can modify it for your purposes. Before we get started, let's take a look at how we would download the correct files in Canvas and then in Beyond Labz. Now, if you're using a different external tool, you could probably still use this script. You just need to figure out what you need to do to modify your script to make it work for you. So I have here a development shell in Canvas, and you can see that I have the gradebook listed. Now you would have students and grades here if this were an active shell, but of course I can't show my students' names and grades, so I'm demonstrating this with an inactive shell. And so what you're going to do is click on Export, and then you're going to export entire gradebook. All right, and then you're going to go over to your external tool, which in my case is Beyond Labz. and I'm going to go into the portfolio section, and I'm going to export CSV. Okay, and then I'm going to download gradebook as a CSV. Now I just have all of the defaults chosen, and that worked for me. So I'm going to choose download as CSV, and that's the way you'll get your files to work with. Okay, so another thing I want to mention is that we don't want to have any extra students. So if you have students who've dropped out and they're not listed in Canvas, for example, but they are in Beyond Labz or your external tool, then you want to make sure that you remove those students before you perform this procedure. So you'll need to open the CSV file with something like OpenOffice, and then you'll need to delete those rows that have the columns that have students that have dropped, and then go ahead and resave that as a CSV, or you can just delete the student in your external tool like Beyond Labz. Okay, so make sure you do that before you get started, or you will possibly put the wrong grades in for some students. So to get started, we want to import Pandas, and so we're going to import Pandas as PD. Then next we need to load our files. So we're going to load our Beyond Labz file, which is this CSV file here, using the pandas read command. And we're going to load our Canvas file and call it Canvas in the same way. Now we're not skipping any rows in the Beyond Labz file. Notice that we don't have an array defined here, but we are going to skip the first or the index 1 row in Canvas, because that's the second row, and the row at that index is not can't map to a row in Canvas, and therefore we don't want to include it. We're going to add that back in at the end. When you download the notebook, you'll need to, of course, replace the file names that I have in the notebook with your file names that you downloaded. So you want to find the file name, such as this one right here, and you'll want to put that into the find row here in the find and replace. So you get to that from edit and then find, right? And then you'll replace it with your file name, whatever that is right here. And you'll need to do that with both the Beyond Labz CSV file and the Canvas CSV file. So the Beyond Labz CSV file is listed here, and the Canvas CSV file is listed here. So you'll need to replace all. You'll need to replace all instances of those two, and that should get you started if you're using Beyond Labz and Canvas. So let's go ahead and run this cell. Okay, we see that we don't get any errors. Next, let's take a look at what the Beyond Labz file looks like. And so we can see here the column names, and we can see the first student name. Now this is obviously a sample student that I've included. Let's take a look now at the Canvas file. And this one here, if you leave the one out in the head command, you'll see the first 5 rows. If you put a 1 in, you're going to see 1 row. So we see here the row with the first student. And this way we can just get the names of the columns listed. Now you can't see the full information here, so we're going to need to open our CSV files up in order to make some corrections in the file so we can use it properly. So the next thing I'm going to do is define my column mapping. So I'm going to then map the Beyond Labz column headings to the Canvas column headings. And so I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So the way that we're going to do this is to create a dictionary, and we're going to map these headings in key value pairs. So we're going to call our dictionary merge map, and we're going to set that equal to the dictionary. So we're going to use our curly braces here. And what we want to do is for each individual column that we want to map, we're going to include a key value pair. So we're going to set it up like this. Key from column in, let's just say the column in Beyond Labz to the value, which is the column header for Canvas. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to separate each one of those with a column. Obviously, if you've done a dictionary before, this is the way you do it. So if you're just opening my file and you don't know how to do this, what you'll need to do is replace the column header with the column header from the column in Beyond Labz that you want to match. And then you need to replace it with your column header from the Canvas column you want to match it with. So you'll need to open your files in order to do that. So let's go ahead and do that now. You can see here that I have my downloaded CSV files. So I'm going to, so this one here is from Canvas, and this one here is from Beyond Labz. So I'm going to open them both with LibreOffice, and you just need to open them as CSVs. It's whatever word processing program you have. Okay, and so you can just choose the defaults here, because what we really need to get is the column header. So in Beyond Labz, we're going to use those for our keys. Okay, so Beyond Labz is here. We're going to map those over to Canvas. So you can see here I've got the Beyond Labz header on the left and the Canvas header on the right. Okay, so let's go back to the let's see, this one is Canvas, and you can tell because it's got these numbers here. All right, and those are your assignment numbers. All right, so I've got counting molecules here. So what I'm going to do is choose that header. So that, see, that's in row 1. I'm going to choose that header, and I'm going to Control C, and I'm going to paste that into the appropriate key in my notebook. Okay, so that one was counting molecules, and you can see that one right here. I pasted that one right here. And then in Canvas, that corresponds to the header lab for counting molecules. So let's go ahead and look at the Canvas gradebook, and that's going to be lab for counting molecules. So I'm going to Control C, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it over into my as my value for that key value pair. So you'll need to do this with each key value pair, Beyond Labz on the left and Canvas on the right. So you're going to choose the column header from Beyond Labz for the key, and the Canvas column header for the value. Okay, you need to do that for each column that you want to match, and you need to do that for your dictionary. So that'll be your individual dictionary. So let's go ahead and I must have messed something up when I was doing that. Let me go ahead and recopy that. So I didn't copy my closing curly braces when I copied it. So I just need to put that in, and then I'll be fine. Okay. For the next cell, I'm going to use the following logic to merge these two spreadsheets. So I'm going to use B to represent Beyond Labz, and I'm going to use C to represent Canvas. So for each of the items, which an item is going to be a key value pair. So for each of the items in my dictionary is merge map, I'm going to represent the B column, the Beyond Labs column, with B underscore COL. And I'm going to represent the C column, the C underscore COL, with C underscore COL. Okay. And so I'm going to loop over my dictionary, and I'm going to look at each of the columns separately, and then I'm going to loop through my um, files and row by row and compare each row, and then see if the grade is higher in Beyond Labs, and if it is, I'm going to replace the Canvas grade. Okay, so well, let's look at each of these lines line by line. So I'm going to look at my dictionary merge map, and I'm going to pull out the items one by one. So each item is a key value pair. So I'm using this for statement. B column is the key, C column is the value, B column is Beyond Labs, C column is Canvas. If C column is not in canvas.columns, then we're going to create a column if it doesn't exist, and this is just to keep from having errors later on. Now if you get an error when you upload it, then that probably came from this. It shouldn't happen as long as you mapped everything appropriately. So we're looking for the I in range of the Beyond Labs CSV file and the Canvas CSV file. Okay, so we're getting the length of those, so we're getting the number of rows of each, and we want to make sure that we don't get an error. So if you'll get an index error if you don't have the same length, or if the length of one of them's longer and it tries to go beyond that. So we've got to limit our search to just the length of the CSV file that's the shortest. And again, if you do everything correctly, you shouldn't have a problem here. This is just kind of a safety check, okay? And so we're going to find the length of those, and we're going to set that to I, and then we're going to look at the B value, which is the Beyond Labs value, and if it's not numeric, we're going to change it to a numeric value. And what coerce means is that if it's a non-numeric value, we're going to replace it with NaN. Okay, shouldn't happen, but that's just to keep from throwing errors here. And then our C value, we're going to convert that to numeric if it's not numeric. This next line checks to make sure that there's an actual number in the Beyond Labs entry for that row and column. Okay, so if it's not a number, then we don't do anything on that particular entry. Okay, so if it is a number, then we will make sure that we'll check to see if it's greater than our Canvas value. So if B value is greater than the Canvas value, or if the Canvas value is not a number, okay, so if there's no entry in Canvas, or if the Beyond Labs value is greater than the value in Canvas, then we're going to replace the Beyond Labs value with the Canvas value. Okay, and then we're just going to have an error checking here. So this cell entry checked all of our rows, so all of our students at every column, at the index for every column, and compared those and replaced the Canvas value with the Beyond Labs value if it was higher. But we have a problem here, and that is that the Canvas CSV file has a row 2 that's not in the Beyond Labs file, and so I took that out just so that our indices matched, and so we got to add that back in. So this next this next cell will actually add those back in. So we're going to read the original Canvas file from our folder. We're going to choose the row that we need to insert, and then we're going to insert that into the correct index in the Canvas file. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that cell. And so we see that it says row 1 inserted. Now the reason we're getting this error here is because some of those columns in row 1 don't have entries. And so what it's saying here is that for a future version of Pandas, the entries that are empty are going to be replaced with not a number. And that might actually be a problem later on. I'm not sure. We may have to come back and edit this to go back and replace those not a numbers with just empty values or no value there. So right now this is working, but later that's going to be, that feature will be changed, and so we'll have to do something about that later. Okay, so the next cell that I'm going to enter is going to just keep the columns that I merged. I don't want to keep any of the extra columns because that might give me an error or overwrite uh, some already previously recorded grades in Canvas, and I don't want to do that. I only want to record the columns I'm interested in. And so I want to identify the columns that I used, and I want to also keep the columns that identify the students. Okay. And so then I want to write everything to a file. Okay. So identify the columns I want to keep and then write it all to a file. And that should export the merged Canvas grade CSV that we need, and that should also include that second row that we need. So let's just go ahead and see what our merged Canvas grades CSV looks like, which we just created. Okay, so you can see here that we have the students and we have the first column and the second. So what happened here was I ran this twice accidentally and I added those 2 rows in. So I've got to be careful with that. I only want to run it one time. So if you run this more than once, you have to delete your previous entry. So let's go ahead and delete this and try it again. Okay, so there we go. All right, now let's take a look. Let's refresh. There we go. All right, so now we still have 2 entries there. So what happened was I actually ran this block twice, and when it did, it inserted that row twice. And so if you have that problem, you'll need to check your CSV file. If you have that problem, just restart your kernel. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and we'll go ahead and rerun everything. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Going to restart the kernel. Okay, so I want to make sure that we get everything correct. All right, and just check everything as you go along. And I could have just done a head on that CSV file. Okay, and so now we should have the correct values here. Let's see. All right, and now we have just one row that we've added in as that second row in Canvas. So we have our header, and then we have our row that tells us the possible points for each section. Now here's how you'll import your file to Canvas. Just click on the import button and choose the CSV file that you want to import. And that's going to be the merged canvas grades.csv. Select and then just choose upload data, and it'll give you a check to make sure that everything's correct. I'll go ahead and upload this to GitHub. If you want to use it as is, it should work for you if you're coming from Beyond Labz to Canvas. If you have some other external tool that you're needing to integrate, you can probably use this file as well. You may need to do a little bit more tweaking to it. If you need any help, if I have time, let me know and I'll try to take a look. But I'm not sure if I'll have time to do that. But good luck. Best wishes in merging your CSV files for grades. Thanks for watching.